Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mokwariola. From the beginning of time to the evolution of present-day life, humanity finds itself at a critical point in history where it is believed that half of the world's population are either being held back, excluded, discriminated against, ignored, marginalized, or left behind. Well, this means upholding human rights is a daily matchup between the rule of law and acts of lawlessness, with people having to justify their right to exist, women needing to defend their right to safety, and minorities pushing to justify their right to access. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on the level of human rights violations in Africa and around the world? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. You take a report, and Africa Today will be right back.
You will not do that to me. You will not do that to me. You will not do that to me. You will not do that to me.
These were the scenes Nigerians had to contend with just barely a week to the global celebration of International Human Rights Day, 10th of December, which has been the custom since 1948, and one celebration that Nigerians continue to hold dear. Nigeria has come from 16 years of oppressive military rule, which ended on 29th of May 1999. And in almost 19 years, many can argue that the human rights situation may have improved. It basically means that we are under constitutional government, and to a certain extent we have access to the courts to challenge the constitutional provisions. Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution deals with human rights. Section 34 of the 1999 Constitution states, "Every individual is entitled to respect for the dignity of his person, and accordingly, A. No person shall be subject to torture or inhuman or degrading treatment." Section 35(1) states, "Every person shall be entitled to his personal liberty, and no person shall be deprived of such liberty, such as the following cases, and in accordance with a procedure permitted by law." Section 36(5) of the 1999 Constitution states that every person charged with a criminal offense shall be presumed innocent until proven guilty.
I feel it's a gross violation of the constitutional provision that says that you're innocent until proven guilty. Let my guilt be established, then come and show me, but not at that level of investigation.
But despite the fact that this has happened, it is not an infrequent occurrence. It is something that happens one too many times. Right across the Nigerian police force to the army and to paramilitary groups, a lot of suspects are oftentimes paraded before pressmen and made to look like criminals, prejudicing what their case may be before their day in court. At the end of the day, this now negates Nigeria's system of justice, the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. One other category of people who deal with the receiving end of unconstitutional rule is the prison population, where our inmate population is more than 60,000, and more than half of that are awaiting trial prisoners. A lot of time, those awaiting trial prisoners serve illegal sentences. Only some days ago, the presidency directed that prisons should be decongested across the Federation of Nigeria. The exercise started in Lagos with the chief judge going to Ikoyi prison, a prison that was built by colonials and to house 800 people today houses more than 3,000 people. Prison officials complain. They talk about amenities, facilities, and are worried about security outbreak and security breaches as a result of the fact that you have too many people in those prisons. One judge had rightly said that they would consider non-custodial sentences, all in a bid to reduce the number of people in our prisons.
Well, before we get into the discussion of the day, let's update you on the top stories around Africa. Rwanda's army says its forces have fought and repelled suspected rebels who crossed into the country from neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, killing 4 of them. The World Health Organization says Ebola vaccinations will soon begin in South Sudan as the country is at a very high risk in the current outbreak in the neighboring DRC. The European Union has prolonged sanctions against Congolese president's chosen successor just 2 weeks before a historic election in the DR Congo. Now joining me to reflect on the World Human Rights Day, I have Tony Dania, lawyer and a human rights activist. And on Skype, I have Osai Ojigho, County Director, Amnesty International Nigeria, and she joins me from Abuja. Good to have you both on the program tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Right, now let me begin with you, Tony. Let's look at the African Charter of Human Rights documents, made up of 68 articles in 4 sections, which merges about 3 clusters of rights, that is the civil, political, economic and cultural rights. Now let's begin with this. How would you assess the level of human rights violations in Africa today?
Oh, well, using Nigeria as a point of reference, the right violations we have, the ones that are reported, the ones that are not reported that private persons like us stumble on are many, and they're not really encouraging. Rights of the person is, apart from the ones for which provisions have been made in the Constitution,
Right.
there are other rights that the Constitution did not cover, but they are natural and legal and recognized. For instance, the rights that the Constitution covers from Section 33 to Section 44, the Constitution itself gave a restriction. And access to justice to get remedy for rights violated has not really been encouraged. Money. And the acts made by the National Assembly supplemental to the constitutional provision on how to pursue your right if it is violated are not really being complied with because the courts are already oversaturated with cases.
Right.
And it costs money to assess. Few rights activists, people like us, take one-off cases. We do it pro bono, we follow it up. We've had the case of we have right of the child's rights, where children are being abused. Children are being forced to marry against their
will.
decisions and without their consent. And children that are underage. This is prevalent in the north. And my co-Muslim brother will want to justify it with a reference to
Sharia.
religion and Sharia. But that is not correct because even the Sharia law says that a child must be of age, and a lady must be of age, and the consent of the lady must be procured. You know, so that's right. And the rights generally in Africa, women's rights are being eroded. And this brings me to a single lady lives under the rights of men. A married lady, the same thing. Then the widow. You need to look at the culture and see how the rights of the widows are being deprived.
So in summary, you are trying to say that the rights of an average African is not up to expectation.
It's not. And those that abuses rights, some of them do it with impunity. I know, because how many cases do you want to take? We need to institutionalize the system in such a way that rights will be protected without any person going through any expensive procedure, like trying to get a good lawyer to represent you. It should be natural. And again, you see, when you file an action relating to remedy for rights abuses and fundamental default, normally it's supposed to be taken speedily. It's supposed to be treated as an urgent matter, but that is not the case. You know, that is not the case. And you won't blame the judges too, because they have so many cases in their hand. We need to separate administration of justice from judicial duties among judges.
All right, let me hold your thought now. We need to go on a very quick break. We'll be back after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, I still have Osai Ojigho, County Director, Amnesty International Nigeria, and she joins me now for her thoughts on this issue. Now, let's look at the rights of women in Africa, which have seen significant development, both national and local level. Now, the continent has espoused a lawful mechanism and, well, declarations such as AU's Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa to ensure fulfillment of African women's ideals, but they are still confronted with challenges, especially in areas of healthcare and education. Now, how would you react to these concerns, and why do you think this is still an issue?
Thank you very much. The rights framework, which sets up the rights of women in Africa, can be derived from the Maputo Protocol. That is the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights that concerns the rights of women. And you find that it extends beyond the international mechanisms, what these rights are. And like you rightly noted, women are yet to enjoy the benefit of this rights framework that Nigeria has signed up to. And it's really a struggle. Nigeria still continues to have a high number of mortality cases, and also due to the incidence of violence against women, quite a high tolerant level of women who have been abused, whether it's domestic abuse, whether it's abuse externally, on the streets, in schools, at the workplaces, which are not being properly addressed, because we still are struggling with the issues of gender inequality in our society. And so we want to go beyond just the law and just beyond the human rights framework to implementation. You find that the major challenge is not that we don't have these laws or we don't have these treaties that are in existence, but how do our institutions actually implement these treaties to make sure they have concrete meaning for women and girls. For a long time, we've been talking about, for example, dealing with issues of FGM, female genital mutilation, of child marriage. And these are issues that are very important because it affects women's sexual and reproductive health rights, and whether women would have the opportunities in order to have a fulfilling life, which in a way is linked to the dignity of the human person as well. And in Nigeria, that is something we are still struggling with, because really no woman should die while giving life, and no woman should be left without the full benefit of health care, which is not fully provided for all women in Nigeria.
And now, knowing that these laws are on ground, Osai, what can we do to fully implement this law so it takes full effect? Because it's one thing to have a law and it's another thing to implement it, like you rightly pointed out. So how can we ensure that these laws are fully followed to the letter so we do not have more needless deaths or human rights abuses, especially on the women folk?
One very good area that government can easily contribute to is increasing the budget on issues that concern women. So when we say we have a budget for health, how much of that money is going into providing healthcare services for women and girls to deal with their unique, specific biological needs?
Right.
How much of this has been provided in the nutritional value that is made available to women and girls in health institutions? If we look at the schools, one of the key things that people have been clamoring for a long while, especially not just around the right to education, but also the right to food, is a school feeding program that actually addresses some of these gaps that we have. The major challenge is that we're not willing to put money as a country to economic, social, and cultural rights, which will go a long way on benefiting both men and women, but women especially, because oftentimes social security are things that women rely on heavily in order to be more productive citizens. So if provisions can be made in the budgetary allocation at federal and state levels, and even implemented at the local government level, would see an improvement in the health and welfare of women and girls.
Now, let me quickly come to you now, Tony. From African children's rights now, according to the UNICEF, that's the United Children's Education Fund, approximately about 150 million children between the ages of 5 and 14 engage in hard labor and adult work. Well, to this end now, there was a African Charter on Rights and Welfare of the Child, which was created to defend and safeguard their innate rights. But nonetheless, we have these cases of child rights abuses each day, in most countries in Africa. Why does this still exist? And why is this case still pertinent with us today?
Yeah, we have isolated cases that have been addressed. The National Orientation Agency comes in here. They should be able to do aggressive publicity, aggressive reorientation, let the masses know that it is an offense, and you don't need to be or go to the police or be a policeman to arrest a situation. I've taken a case of a child of 13, Shiamaka, who was tortured and sent to the village. We got the parents and herself to come to Lagos. We took it up. We arrested the people that tortured her. We sent them to jail. But you see, this is one off, and how many can we attend to? But if every person knows that it is wrong to see an underage, being forced to, instead of being in school, you doing one thing or the other. So I think aggressive reorientation of the masses, that's number one. I want to quickly refer to a decision of the Supreme Court in 2014 that when the cultural law or traditional law is repugnant to the social justice, the court need to intervene. In Igbo land, for instance, it is a male-male affair. Once parents is dead, it is the senior male child or senior elder. That has been changed. Women can now inherit their father's properties. I think the Supreme Court has made pronouncement. Now, how many persons are aware in the East that there is a Supreme Court decision that women can now inherit their father's property? That is one. So the National Orientation Agency and similar agencies of the state should come in here. And then, we can't talk about human rights without talking about security agencies.
Right.
Now, the common one is when somebody is detained beyond reasonable time and all that. Don't forget that the same constitution that gives you this right has provisions on restrictions. And then one of the sections on restriction is Section 45, which gives some restriction. Section 308 of the Constitution of 1999 also gives immunity, and during emergency, national security, we have restrictions here and there. Now, the police also have their duties. The police, when they arrest, for instance, the facility, like the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, provides that you cannot interrogate a suspect without the lawyer being there, without you having videos. Where is the light? Where is the video? What have you given to the police to work in order for them to comply? What training, what retraining or reorientation have you given to the police? I'm not making a case for the police because sometimes they can be very, very unnecessarily abusive of the law, and for whatever reason they like playing, they like to satisfy the complainant instead of looking at what the law provides. We've had a lot of cases where the police will want to just satisfy a complainant. We've had a case of Mrs. Fatima Balal that we also took, that the police were saying, no, this woman must go in. She has been detained for 23 days before we came in. And she spent 5 months in prison. But she was discharged and acquitted. And then how do you get the authority to compensate her? So, yes, these are cases. So let us institutionalize the procedure for upholding and enhancing the right of the citizen. In the sense that if a lot of people have suffered and there's no way for them to get justice. I want to quickly refer to, I was in Panti some 8-9 years ago. I saw a woman with a small child crying. I came for another matter. And I said, what happened? She said a man defied her child, and they got to the police station, and the police asked her to go. The man is a big man. I don't want to mention him. He was, as at that time, into big-time sales of transformer. He took a lady, myself and a lady. The lady produces pure water at Agbara. We came together. We took that matter up. The man was jailed. Now, if we didn't intervene, what happens? The woman just cried. It didn't happen around Volkswagen area or Job police station. He came to Kpanti. As at that time, Yinka Balogun was the Deputy Commissioner of Police.
So is this a case of the law not being strengthened to handle cases, as in, let me rephrase myself now, is it the case of the law being manipulated to favor some, you know, some offenders and to the detriment of those who have been abused? Because you have the police who have to uphold the law, but in this case, they are being used to satisfy the wishes of, like you rightly put out, the complainant. So how can this matter be fully addressed so that we do not have cases where people go to police stations or go to seek redress or go to, you know, file a complaint, and then they end up being abused or end up being thrown back or facing a different story altogether?
Lagos State government has taken a bold step. They set up agencies within the government that addresses that, but the agency is overwhelmed. Then, Lagos State have set up special court for certain special offenses. Now, if, for instance, any person is initiating an idea of going to rape a lady in Lagos State, he will be afraid. Because once that allegation is made and you go to the regular court, they tell you, no, we are not doing this matter. There's a special court. You know? So now let us take everything about abuses of rights very serious, such that once any person suffers from anybody, whoever that person is, the idea of immunity is gradually being reduced in Lagos State. I hope that will be reflected at the national level too.
Right.
Once there is an abuse, just go to a certain place, and it should not be one place. I know that most of the Lagos State Commissioner of Police is also setting up human rights sections. You know, but these human rights sections have started investigating advanced fee fraud and other matters instead of concentrating on their, the essence of their creation. So once any person suffers from right abuse, the person knows, because he is educated, he has been hearing jingles on the radio and TV, he knows where to go.
Okay,
when he goes there, and the issues will be addressed seriously.
Right, let's quickly get the thoughts of Osai Ojigho on another matter which refers to the LGBT community, which affects some countries in Africa. Now, in most countries in Africa, homosexuality is punishable by death, and most African leaders claim it is brought in the continent from other parts of the world. Now, what has been done in this area to change this perception and perhaps the penalties on individuals who belong to the LGBT community?
So this issue of LGBTI in Nigeria became more pronounced when the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act was passed. And in actual effect, while the attempt was trying to address morality issues, it has now been used as a tool by security agents to blackmail and actually to extort money from young men in particular. So when we try to address the issues of LGBTI in Nigeria, we begin to ask ourselves, what really is the business of government? Is it in the privacy of individuals, or actually in ensuring that people are treated with dignity and respect? And this is one area that has caused a lot of issues within Africa, and which in actual effect we shouldn't really be involving ourselves in. Whether you're LGBTI or not, you need your rights to be respected. And unfortunately, the emergence of these restrictive laws, which tend to criminalize homosexuality, has actually led to abuse and
so what
to
has been done to change this perception now, Osai, from your own perspective as a human rights advocate?
Every human being is born with dignity and respect. And so what that means is that we have to respect people's wishes and people's sexual orientation. We don't have to agree with it, but we need to recognize that. And it's the same way that we also recognize the dignity of persons, of minorities, or persons, and this is not to liken people with disabilities with LGBTI, but to recognize the fact that people are different, and different does not necessarily mean bad. But instead, we should learn to understand who people are and should be focused more on protecting people's dignity rather than exposing them to further abuse.
And finally, before I let you go, sorry for interrupting you, but finally, before I let you go, what other areas of concern do you think that can be considered, and how do you think we can move ahead as a continent in reshaping our rights values?
I think right now the issue is about violence and how we've become a continent and a people who are highly tolerant of violence, especially violence against women and other minorities. And we need to address this as a justice failure and as a failure for us to be able to protect those who are the most vulnerable. And instead, we should put mechanisms in place to ensure everyone has an opportunity to get access to justice, to be heard, and to be protected. Once we can resolve that, then it will be a lot easier for us to deal with issues of injustice, inequality in our country.
All right, and at that point, we'll wrap up the show. Thank you very much, Osai Ojigho, County Director, Amnesty International Nigeria, for your analysis on Africa Today. And my guest in the studio with me here, Tony Dania, lawyer and human rights activist. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you so much.
At a time when humanity is set to beat war with itself by exhibiting hostility towards human rights, present-day violations remains a challenge to making the world a better place, with lessons of the past waiting to act as guidelines for the future. While the promotion and protection of human rights requires a strong link between government and the justice system, civil society, and to ensure that a life of equality, dignity, and respect for everyone is possible. And that is our package for tonight. But don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG, and follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. Until the next one again, I am Esther Omokwariola, and always remember, Africa can only get better. Thank you.